On this week's NESN Patriots podcast, we will preview the Patriots' Week 1 matchup against the Texans and give the 6 top storylines entering the 2018 season. Hello and welcome. This is Doug Kide. Welcome to the NESN Patriots podcast. Joined as always by Zach Hawks. Zach, how are you doing?
You know, Doug, I'm a little stressed right now.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, so I'm trying to prepare. You and I are in this fantasy football league tonight.
Yeah.
It's a dynasty league with an auction draft, neither of which I've ever done. And I've realized in my research over the last couple hours that I'm probably going to get pummeled in this draft and subsequently pummeled in this entire league. So not great times for me right now.
Yeah, you might be a little distracted during this. I will say that I think that everyone in the league, which also includes some people like Henry McKenna, Kevin Duffy, Bill Barnwell, also haven't done anything like this, I think. So we're all kind of coming at this from ground zero. But, yeah, I think that, is ground zero the right word there?
Square one,
Square
maybe.
one, yeah. All right, yeah. 1 instead of 0. I don't know why I said
Both of our
ground zero.
brains are scrambled right now.
But yeah, I think I've realized over the last week or so that dynasty auction values don't exist on the internet, so we're all kind of coming at this blind. But
Absolutely.
we will power through it. The last time that we talked to you guys, we were in a car on the way home from New Jersey after the Patriots' 4th and final preseason game, and a lot has gone down since then. The Patriots cut almost half their team, which that shouldn't come as much of a surprise since the Patriots did have to do roster cuts. But roster cuts do seem like they were a long time ago now. I wouldn't say there was anything mind-blowing in there that hasn't been fixed to this point. The one kind of crazy thing is that it seems like, Brandon Bolden is finally off the Patriots roster. He had been on the team since 2012. He was signed by the Miami Dolphins, so definitely a different presence in the Patriots running back room this season.
Yeah, to me that was the biggest surprise as well, which, kind of goes to show you that there weren't really any big surprises if a running back / special teamer leaving the team who probably wasn't going to have a great role on offense anyway. That's the big mind-blowing news. So nothing crazy coming out of cutdown day, but it was a little interesting to see Brandon Bolden finally leave. This happened last year. The Patriots cut Bolden on cutdown day only to bring him back the very next day. It was kind of a roster technicality situation where they had to keep one player on the roster so they can place him on IR. We expected the same thing to happen this year, but nope, Brandon Bolden gone, down in Miami with Danny Amendola now.
Yeah, it's Patriots really far south. You've got Patriots contingencies all over the nation at this point, in Houston, Miami, Tennessee, Detroit. Another interesting thing out of cutdowns was that the Patriots really only kept 3 full-time wide receivers on the roster. They did cut Riley McCarron, Devin Lucien, Paul Turner, KJ May, but they picked up 2 wide receivers off waivers. They claimed Amara Darboh from the Seahawks, Chad Hansen from the Jets. Darboh already gone. He failed his physical with the Patriots. He'll reportedly have surgery. So Hansen's the remainder there. I'm not sure how much he'll do in the first couple of weeks of the season, but he basically is serving as injury insurance in case Philip Dorsett, Chris Hogan, or Cordero Patterson goes down before Julian Edelman comes back from his suspension.
Yeah, at the moment, Hansen just seems like sort of a body in there right now, just because it's too risky to go into a season with just 3 true wide receivers, not counting Matthew Slater, who plays there occasionally but is obviously mainly a special teamer. I'm not expecting a ton from Hansen. I believe he only had, 8 or 9 catches with the Jets last season as a rookie. He was a 4th-round draft pick just last year, so teams obviously felt pretty highly of him coming out of college at Cal. The Patriots did take a look at him before the draft last year, and he fits a lot of their measurables, a lot of the traits that they look for in a wide receiver, and you can definitely say he does have some potential. But just given how difficult it is for a wide receiver to come in this late in the process, like we saw with Philip Dorsett last year, who was a 1st-round draft pick who had more experience in the NFL, he did next to nothing last year for the Patriots. So I don't expect Hansen to have any sort of significant role at least early in the season, but it'll be interesting to see, 1, how long he sticks around, and 2, whether he can work his way into the lineup down the road.
Yeah, I do think it's notable that he was a 4th-round pick because teams did seem to like him coming out of Cal, like you said. And the other notable thing is just that he signed through 2020. Coming into this season, the Patriots only had 2 wide receivers that were signed beyond this season, and that was Julian Edelman and Braxton Berrios, who's spending the season on injury reserve. So he'll head into his 2nd season with no NFL experience whatsoever. So just having a guy in there like Hansen, who is signed through 2020, I think that gives the Patriots the potential there moving forward. And if Hansen was drafted last year in the 4th round. That's the same round that Malcolm Mitchell was drafted in back in 2016. That's really not that low of a draft pick. So that is definitely a player who still has upside in the NFL. Obviously not a great sign that he couldn't even make the Jets, but maybe he'll turn things around with the Patriots. I don't have high hopes for him. I'm not sure if he's going to make it through the season, but he's at least another wide receiver that the Patriots have for the future at that position.
Yep, at the very least, it's good to have a little bit of a base layer there at that position entering free agency next year. In the instance that Chris Hogan or Philip Dorsett or Cordell Patterson or any of these players are not re-signed. But that's obviously long ways down the road. Who knows if Hansen even sticks around that long.
One other newsy item since we last recorded was that the Patriots cut and then re-signed Brian Schwenke. He's their 8th offensive lineman. The Patriots don't have a 4th offensive tackle on their roster. I think the fact that they're heading into this season with just Trent Brown, Marcus Cannon, and Ladrian Waddle at offensive tackle certainly bodes well for Marcus Cannon's status in Week 1. Definitely seems like he should be a full go for Week 1 since the Patriots don't have. If Cannon was inactive in Week 1, then the Patriots would not have a backup offensive tackle. Ted Karras is not a tackle. Perhaps they could move Joe Thuney over, but it seems like there's nothing really to worry about there.
Yeah, it was a little bit surprising to me that, we all expected them to add another offensive lineman after final cuts. I think we all expected it to be a tackle just because tackle depth, I guess, is a little, I don't know if I would say it's more important, but it's a little bit harder to come by, and the Patriots needed it last year when Marcus Cannon missed half of the season, and the fact that Cannon didn't play at all in the preseason, has dealt with injuries all summer. Even if he's fully recovered now from whatever injury did ail him, which it seems like he is, and he is expected to play in Week 1, you'd think they maybe wanted to have a little bit more insurance there. I guess they technically do, because they did bring back Cole Croston on the practice squad, so they can, in case of emergency, they can promote him whenever at any point during the season. So maybe they're happy with having him there. But yeah, it was a little bit of a surprise to see them bring back an interior guy rather than a tackle.
Patriots also have a gentleman named Eric Smith, I believe it is, on their practice squad.
I can't say I know too much about Eric Smith. He played with Miami correct?
I think he was being groomed as a swing tackle in Miami. I think he's only listed at 6'4", so he's a little bit undersized for a tackle, but I don't know, seems like a guy who is either a tackle or a guard. We don't know too much about him, but he exists, so I figured that I would mention him. The last newsy item that we have on the docket is on the docket, but my phone keeps going to black, so I can't see it right now. Oh, Patriots had full health at practice.
They did.
That's good news, especially Sony Michel and Rex Burkhead. They participated in the drills that we were allowed to watch in practice. We're only allowed to watch individual drills, so I'm not sure how much to really read into that. But based on the Patriots roster cuts, based on the fact that they cut Mike Gillislee, that they cut Kenneth Farrow, that they put Ralph Webb on the practice squad, and that they risked Ralph Webb through waivers, getting him onto the practice squad, indicates to me that the Patriots expect to have at least one of Rex Burkhead or Sony Michel on the field in Week 1, because they can't go into Week 1 with just Jeremy Hill and James White at running back. That would be way too risky.
Yeah, I would agree with that assessment. I think if I had to guess right now, they will probably have one of Michel or Burkhead, and I would expect it to be Rex Burkhead, who's the reports throughout the preseason have been that he will be ready for Week 1, and it does seem to be the case, at least from the brief time we've been able to watch them at practice. We have seen, like you said, we're only allowed to watch 5 or 10 minutes of practice at this point. It's not like in training camp when we can watch the entire thing. But Burkhead and Michel both were players who would be held out of even these early positional drills a couple weeks ago. Now they're participating in everything that we're able to see, which is obviously a good sign for them. I'd still probably lean toward Michel sitting out Week 1. There's a chance he could be healthy and he could play, but I don't know, just with all the time he's missed, with the fact that he's a rookie, the fact that he still hasn't played in any sort of NFL game, I wouldn't be surprised if they took it a little bit slower with him, especially since we talked to Bill Belichick this morning. He acknowledged that, Michel's a little bit behind. It's natural for a player, especially this young, who's both trying to get on the field and learn the whole system at the same time. I think it's going to be a little bit of a slower road for him, and honestly, I'm not really expecting a ton from Sony Michel, even in the first month, 6 weeks of the season, just because it takes rookies, even first-round picks, it takes them a long time, a while sometimes, to kind of get the flow of an NFL game.
Yeah, and I think the fact that they have Rex Burkhead, James White, and a guy like Jeremy Hill, who's a former 1,000-yard rusher, on their team, you don't
need to push it.
Yeah, they can stay a little bit more patient with Sony Michel. I think that it's a little easier for running backs to get acclimated to this system more so than a wide receiver or something. But it is still a complicated playbook. Patriots will still need Sony Michel to be comfortable in blitz pickup. They'll need him to be comfortable in the passing game. They don't want to throw him out there as a one-dimensional player. So I think that it could take a little while. And yeah, we'll predict our inactives a little bit later. But at this point, I would be a little bit surprised if he was active for week 1, since the Patriots seem to be close to being at full health at this point in the season. Just a rundown of other guys basically to watch for when the injury report comes out on Wednesday and when the statuses come out on Friday. A couple other guys who did miss preseason games, did miss time this summer, would be wide receiver Matthew Slater and safety Nate Ebner, both special teamers. You've got tight end Jacob Hollister on that list, Marcus Cannon, who we mentioned previously, defensive end Trey Flowers, I think that, and rookie cornerback Duke Dawson.
Yep.
I think
that just about covers it.
Might be the full list there. Among those guys, I think we know the least. Well, we don't know a whole lot about really any of their status. Trey Flowers said he'd be good to go for week 1.
He said, "I'm a football player, and it is time for football to be played," which is a fantastic quote.
It was
So
a
yes,
fantastic quote.
Trey Flowers does say that he plans to be out there for week 1.
I think the two guys who have the most mystery surrounding them maybe would be Matthew Slater and Nate Ebner. Both those guys started the season on PUP. Matthew Slater wasn't even showing up at games, or he'd show up for
the captain's coin toss, and then
but
kind
he
of
wouldn't
disappear.
be out there for warm-ups.
Yeah.
And then Nate Ebner tore his ACL in November or December, so it really wouldn't be surprising if the Patriots had to hold him off for a couple of weeks to start the season. But there's definitely some injury question marks heading into week 1, but the fact that everyone's at least practicing is definitely a good sign.
Yeah, and it does seem like the most significant players on that list does seem like they do at least intend to and expect to play against the Texans. Trey Flowers, Marcus Cannon, who we mentioned before, Rex Burkhead, who we mentioned before. Duke Dawson, I'm not really expecting him to play a ton, whether he's healthy or not.
Right.
And then Matthew Slater and Nate Ebner, obviously they're important special teamers, but those positions are a little bit easier to kind of replace with other bodies than say ones on offense or defense.
Well, let's get into week 1 a little bit. Obviously the Texans they could be a tough team this year. They were
a tough team last year for the Patriots.
Right, yeah. And until Deshaun Watson got hurt, they were looking like they could have possibly been contenders in a weak AFC South. I guess it wasn't that weak, but yeah. But they've got a lot of headliner-type players. They've got Deshaun Watson at quarterback. They've got J.J. Watt at defensive end, Whitney Merciless at defensive end. They've got Jadeveon Clowney at defensive end, DeAndre Hopkins at wide receiver. So definitely a lot of pieces in there that the Patriots have to worry about. Who do you think is most concerning on that list of players? I guess you could throw Tyrann Mathieu in there as well. Who are you most concerned about?
I think right now it has to be Deshaun Watson, just because the Patriots really didn't have much of an answer for him in the game that these teams played last year, which was week 3 of last season, Watson's second career start. Patriots got a ton of pressure against Houston's terrible offensive line, which has been basically completely revamped this year, so we'll see if they get a little bit better protection from him. But they couldn't tackle him. They couldn't corral him. He was able to just kind of duck and weave and dodge and get away from all of these pass rushers. He was just leaving guys like Trey Flowers and Dietrich Wise and Adam Butler, just basically leaving them on the ground. And all of them have talked this week about how difficult it is to kind of corral and keep a mobile quarterback like that in the pocket. Now, we don't know what kind of Deshaun Watson we're going to see in this game, because obviously he is coming off a torn ACL. This is his first real game since that injury, which took place in week 7 or 8 of last season. It was just about at the halfway point. That's an injury that, as we've discussed before with Julian Edelman, often takes players sometimes even a full season to get back to full strength after one of those things, especially a player like Watson who relies so much on his quickness and his maneuverability out there. Maybe he won't be quite as dynamic of a player as the Patriots saw here last year. But even if he's not making all these plays with his legs, he's still a quality quarterback, and he's got a lot of good weapons in DeAndre Hopkins and Will Fuller, who didn't play in this Patriots game last year. So I think this is kind of an underrated Texans offense, honestly, as long as their offensive line is capable, which it was not even didn't even come close to being last year. The defense gets all the headlines, but I think this is definitely an offense that you can't sleep on, especially if Watson is at his best out there.
Yeah, I definitely have some questions about Watson. I'll definitely be interested to see how he plays this year. It seems like everyone's just assuming that he will come back as good or better than he was last season. And I mean, we've seen quarterbacks like Robert Griffin III who had this injury during his rookie season, and he was never the same player, never even close to being the same player. So I'm not saying that's going to happen to Watson, but that possibility at least exists for a quarterback who relies so much on his mobility to come back as kind of a different player. And I mean, I don't know if people forget this, but Robert Griffin III was unbelievable during his rookie season. So it's not like, I think that people think of Robert Griffin III as being the back half of Robert Griffin III's career. Robert Griffin III was Deshaun Watson before Deshaun Watson.
He was awesome.
And now he's basically one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL. So I'm definitely curious to see what Watson can do this early after the ACL tear. I think that, there's some questions about J.J. Watt and his ability to recover from the injury as well, especially since he's never really been that effective against the Patriots because they've game planned so well for him.
He has like a half of a sack in his entire career against the Patriots?
It's really kind of unbelievable what Marcus Cannon and the Patriots offensive line have been able to do against him. Obviously, Cannon is coming off the injury, didn't play in the preseason, so that's a concern. But I might almost say that, DeAndre Hopkins or maybe either Clowney or Merciless is perhaps the most dangerous player in this game for the Texans. I think that, whoever's going to be rushing off the edge across from Trent Brown could possibly have some issues against them. Brown has not been perfect this summer, despite what, some reporters seem to say about the guy. And Hopkins, he only had 7 catches for 76 yards against the Patriots last season. Stephon Gilmore did pick off a pass from Deshaun Watson, but Gilmore also led up, I think, 2 defensive pass interference penalties for 42 or 43 total yards against Hopkins. Logan Ryan was actually kind of a DeAndre Hopkins killer during his time with the Patriots. So I just want to see Gilmore or Eric Rowe match that effort against Hopkins this week. And that's actually a question I asked Bill Belichick this morning is there advantages to having a player like Eric Rowe who's the same size and just as long as Stephon Gilmore across the field from Gilmore, because maybe that means that you don't have to have Gilmore following Hopkins across the field or around the field. Maybe you can just play sides with those guys, and then they might be a little bit more comfortable on their side of the field. He did say that there are definitely some advantages to that is helpful. Obviously, Rowe isn't as good as Gilmore, but if you look at their measurables, their size, their length, they're very similar from their pure tool standpoint. So I don't know. I think that that's a matchup that definitely bears watching, especially if Rowe is going to be covering Hopkins at all in this game.
Definitely. And going back to the Texans defense for a second, they have what's probably one of the best front sevens in football when they're all healthy, and all those players are healthy right now. J.J. Watt, Whitney Merciless, Jadeveon Clowney, even guys like Zach Cunningham and Bernardrick McKinney, both of them went over 90 tackles last year. They're not quite as the type of game wreckers as the players earlier on that list
We
are.
should have asked Belichick about McKinney this morning. Belichick was pretty bad in his press conference, but he loves Bernardrick McKinney. He probably would have gone on for 10 minutes.
Bernardrick McKinney, he was the guy who had 17 tackles against the Patriots a couple years back. But to my point, the Patriots have never really had much trouble putting up points against the Texans defense. No. I mean, their last games against the Texans, going back the last couple of years, 36 points, 34 points, 27, 34, 41, 42. So they've always put up a ton of points against this team. One of those games was when they had Jacoby Brissett at quarterback, basically running a high school offense. So I'm not really concerned about the Patriots kind of being a quality offense in this game, the type of offense that they usually are. I mean, basically, if they can protect Tom Brady, which they've done a pretty solid job of when they've played the Texans in the past, I think they're usually pretty fine in that regard.
I always kind of laugh heading into, I guess, really any matchup for the Patriots, because we always ask these players, oh, man, DeAndre Hopkins, what's he going to do? Or, J.J. Watt, how tough is it to block him and all this stuff? And, these guys never really seem to actually do anything against the Patriots. No matter who it is, I guess Antonio Brown has had good games against the Patriots, but I feel like these top-tier players never take over the game against the Patriots. And this is purely anecdotal, and I might be forgetting someone massive in the past who just completely wrecked the player as a top-tier all-pro perennial player. But it seems like Bill Belichick always does a very good job of keying in on those best players in the NFL and making sure that that player doesn't beat them. So I almost feel like on these weeks we're almost like wasting our time, spending so much time talking about these guys.
It happens before every time they play the Broncos. We talk about Von Miller for 4 straight days, and then he ends up with a quarterback hit and maybe half a sack or something like that, and isn't really that much of a factor. That's definitely one of the strengths of the Patriots. Their whole game plan, their Bill Belichick's entire coaching staff. They're going to take your best player and take him out of the game. I mean, if you're going to beat the Patriots, you're going to have your number 2, number 3, number 4 players step up, and a lot of teams don't have those type of players.
Yeah, and as we've kind of been saying, the Texans do, and Merciless and Clowney behind Watt. So certainly interesting. We're not behind them, across from him, near him, whatever.
In the same unit,
in the same
as
defense. Yeah. All right. I think that we have talked about the Texans enough. Let's play a little game called Guess the Inactives. We were actually just talking about this before, full disclosure. I think that if Michelle can't play, then that frees up one spot.
Yes. So for those of you who are unaware, seven players from each team's 53-man roster must be considered inactive for each game. They're only allowed to dress 46 players. So those are either players who are injured or players who are healthy scratches.
Right. So let's start off with Michelle. I think maybe the safest inactive would be Duke Dawson, just because we didn't get to see it today, but he has been limited in practice in the past. Hasn't played a whole lot in special teams in the preseason, so I don't know if he'll be ready to go in this game. Chad Hansen would be another one where I think that might be pretty safe coming in so early before week 1 that he might not be ready to go in this game, that he might be injury insurance. If an injury happens in this game, it would be for week 2, week 3, week 4.
Yep. Yeah, slightly dangerous to go into a game with just 3 wide receivers, but we saw the Patriots do it last season a couple times.
Yeah, and I guess that raises the point of if Matthew Slater is one of the inactives, then maybe Chad Hansen's not. But I still honestly would not be surprised if the Patriots only went into the game with 3 wide receivers if Hansen and Slater were inactive. But for now, I would say Michelle, Dawson, Hansen. You got to throw Brian Schwenke in there, I think. Mm-hmm. I think the Patriots only need to go into this game with 7 offensive linemen. There's probably going to be at least one more rookie cornerback in there. Would you bank on Keon Crossan or J.C. Jackson?
If I would say Keon Crossan is more likely to be inactive for this game. Both of them did play a decent amount on special teams during the preseason, but I think Jackson brings more both on the defensive side, where he was much more reliable, you could say, and on special teams we saw him work a lot as a punt gunner, and especially if Matthew Slater doesn't play in this game, you could see him slide into that spot opposite Jonathan Jones. It's a spot that Johnson Batamosi played a lot last year, so I think that he could definitely be sliding into that spot, or both of them could end up being inactive, but I think if one of them plays, Jackson definitely has the better chance.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And then I think Keontae Davis would be our 6th pick. What do you think for a 7th guy in here?
I think either Slater or Ebner is a good choice in there. Just because they didn't play at all in the preseason. We don't really know exactly what is ailing them right now. With Ebner, you assume that it's just a slow recovery from the ACL tear, which, I mean, it isn't even really a slow recovery if he only suffered that injury less than, 7 months ago or something like that. It often takes players longer than that to fully come back. Not really sure what the deal is with Slater right now. He dealt with a hamstring injury that kept him out of basically half of last season. So I wouldn't be surprised if one of them sits out, not only this game, but maybe even a couple other games moving forward.
Yeah, I would say given the timing of Ebner's ACL tear, I might go with him above Slater, but there's just so many question marks surrounding Slater. So what have we got in here? We've got Sonny Michel, Chad Hansen, Duke Dawson, Keon Crossan, Keontae Davis,
Brian Schwenke,
and Nate Ebner. That's our guess?
Yeah, I would say so.
I mean, you
could put a guy like Geno Grissom in there, but the Patriots did keep fewer pure special teamers than in previous years. So I expect that you're going to see guys like Grissom and Brandon King and Nick Grigsby in this game.
Yeah, I think that if Geno Grissom's on the roster, there's I think that as odd as this sounds, he probably takes over for Brandon Bolden. He's basically Brandon Bolden this season. The Patriots just have the extra depth there at defensive end and linebacker rather than running back. But yeah, he would, I think he'll probably wind up playing. Let's get into the top storylines of the season before we get out of here. First one, Tom Brady's 41 years old. We'll see how he holds up.
He's 41?
41 years old. A year older. Last year was 40.
We should have written a story or two about that.
I think it happened on August 3rd. Is that when he turned 41?
There was cake.
Yeah, there was. I didn't get any, though.
I know, me neither. It was out in the sun all day, though.
Yeah,
I don't think you really want cake in August sun.
No, it was so hot this summer, and I thought about going over to get cake during practice. I was like, I don't know, that's a hot cake. I prefer a cold cake to a hot cake personally.
Not a hot cake guy.
No, definitely not. I don't like to microwave a cake. That would be a weird move. I don't know. I mean, I think Tom Brady's going to be the same as always. I don't know how much there is to the storyline, but it is a storyline, and it is going to be talked about all year. But I don't really expect him to get off to a slow start. I don't think that him sitting out the spring is going to impact anything. I think if anything, he might get out to a slow start because he's got kind of a weaker wide receiver core. But he's going to be Tom Brady. He looked like Tom Brady in the preseason. I think he's going to look like Tom Brady in week 1.
Yeah, I agree. I think the only thing that could really limit him in that regard is if one of his proven weapons doesn't really play up to his potential. If for some reason Chris Hogan or Rob Gronkowski or James White or one of those guys kind of struggles for whatever reason in the first couple weeks, then I think you could see the offense be a little bit discombobulated. But I don't think it's going to be by anything Tom Brady does. From what we've seen ever since he returned in late July, he's looked like Tom Brady. So I wouldn't be worried if I was a Patriots fan.
I would say the second big storyline is just Julian Edelman's 4-game suspension. Tom Brady will not have Julian Edelman to rely on. And in the past, he has kind of struggled when he hasn't had either Danny Amendola or Julian Edelman to throw to. It even goes back as far as Wes Welker. Basically, if he's been without one of those players, he hasn't been quite the same. I think it's possible that Chris Hogan might be at the point in this offense where he'll be able to kind of step up into that role a little bit. We'll see how Philip Dorsett can do in that slot type role. It seems like he's had a pretty good preseason with Tom Brady. But yeah, there's definitely some question marks at wide receiver. I don't think that, I guess this is something we can get kind of deep into because Patriots fans have been very annoying about the wide receiver position, thinking that the Patriots should somehow solve this issue before week 1 when there's no solution. They tried to address the wide receiver position. As far back as July, we were talking about how deep the wide receiver position was with the Patriots when they had, basically we couldn't whittle down the wide receivers to just 6 in 53-man roster projections. You had to throw 7 in there one way or the other with Jordan Matthews and Kenny Britt, and Malcolm Mitchell was in there at the time. We thought that Braxton Berrios could do something. We thought that Riley McCarron could do something. They tried to address the position. Everyone failed, including Eric Decker. And now for the first 4 weeks of the season, they were left with Chris Hogan, Philip Dorsett, Cordero Patterson, Chad Hansen, and Matthew Slater. So, I don't know. There's nothing they can do about it at this point. If there was a trade to be made, I think they would have made it. If there was a signing to be made, I think they would have made it. But they clearly feel better about bringing in a Chad Hansen type rather than like a Dez Bryant for however much money he would command. And honestly, when it really comes down to it, I don't think Bill Belichick thinks there's a need to bring in another wide receiver. I think he likes what he has in Philip Dorsett. I think that he always likes what he's had in Chris Hogan. I think that he thinks that Cordero Patterson can be a gadget-type number 3 receiver. And if they brought in another wide receiver, if they invested a lot of resources in a guy like Golden Tate or paid Dez Bryant a bunch of money, then I think that he would be sitting there saying, well, what are we going to do with him after week 4?
Yeah.
Are we going to sit Philip Dorsett after we spent so much time with him? Are we going to sit Chris Hogan when we spent so much time with him? I just don't think it would have been realistic, especially when that guy was coming in, from the beginning and trying to learn the Patriots offense. So the Patriots just have to get by with what they have at this point.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think Philip Dorsett is definitely going to be kind of I don't know if the linchpin's the right word. I don't know what the X factor. Yeah. If he can be a serviceable number 2 receiver, even if he can be a serviceable number 3 receiver who's playing as a number 2 receiver, then I think the Patriots are going to be just fine. I mean, it's a little bit difficult to expect anything from Dorsett, even though we have liked what we've seen from him in the preseason and over the summer. But he didn't do anything really in the Patriots offense last year, despite having many opportunities. Obviously, he's now there. He's been there a whole year. He's been in the system. Tom Brady seems to have kind of brought him into his trust tree.
Yeah.
So I think the Patriots are expecting much more from him this season, and I think it's safe to expect much more from him this season. And if the Philip Dorsett thing doesn't work out, if they can't really find a way to get Cordarrelle Patterson involved 4 or 5 weeks in the season, then maybe I think you could see them try to go into a different direction. But like you said, it does seem like they're at least satisfied with the depth they have there right now, especially because they have Rob Gronkowski, especially because they have James White and Rex Burkhead when he's healthy, and potentially Sony Michel when he gets back on the field. I think they do have enough weapons. I think they're fine with having a leaner wide receiving core than they have in recent years. Like I said, maybe that'll change a little ways into the season, but right now they have what they have.
Yeah, I mean, the Patriots don't really have a number one receiver right now, but Rob Gronkowski is the Patriots' number one receiver.
Mm-hmm.
Chris Hogan will be their number two. I'd say that the running backs in general will be number three. It'll be James White and Rex Burkhead. And then you're really only counting on Philip Dorsett to really be your number four in the offense. I think that he can certainly handle that. The Patriots' offense just looks a little different than other teams' offenses, but no other team has Rob Gronkowski in their offense. It's kind of similar to the Chiefs where, I always get the Kelce's mixed up.
Travis
Kelce is their number one receiver, despite the fact that he's a tight end. And I think you see that when a guy who's that talented of a tight end is in your offense. Antonio Gates was the Chargers' number one receiver back in the day, and Greg Olsen is probably the Panthers' number one receiver as well. So that's just basically the way the Patriots' offense is constructed. And if anyone can get by without having a number one for 4 weeks, it would be the Patriots, because they do rely on Gronk and James White so very much. So let's get into our number 3 storyline, which is, what will the Patriots get out of their rookie class? I think that we can already say probably not a whole lot, since their top overall pick, Isaiah Wynn, is out for the season. Braxton Berrios, the wide receiver, is out for the season. Tight end Ryan Izzo is out for the season. Linebacker Christian Sam is out for the season. Duke Dawson and Sony Michel already are banged up. And then you've got 5th-round linebacker Juwan Bentley, who could start. Maybe Landon Roberts will start. Regardless of who plays that role, they're probably only playing about half or a quarter of the defensive snaps anyway, since the Patriots run with 2 linebackers so much. So as far as rookie impact players, it comes down to Bentley, Duke Dawson, and Sony Michel, and I'm not sure if we're looking at week 1 saying that any of those guys is going to play anywhere near most of their respective snaps.
Yeah, you could say that there's no real there's no player that the Patriots are looking at right now and expecting to start week 1. I wouldn't think. I think you can put J.C. Jackson in that group of people who could potentially make some sort of an impact over the course of this season. But yeah, it's a little interesting that exactly half of their draft class is on injured reserve right now.
We forgot Keon Crossan. He made the roster as well.
Keon Crossan did. Danny Etling is obviously got cut. He's now on the practice squad. Yep. So there aren't many names to choose from. There are a few more than there were last year, when the Patriots didn't have much of a rookie class at all outside of Dietrich Wise and Adam Butler. I think if you have to pick one of those guys right now, I'd say maybe Juwan Bentley. From what he showed in the preseason, the Patriots did show a willingness to slot him in there over someone like a Landon Roberts. And even though the Patriots do run that 2 linebacker set a lot last year, they do run that two linebacker set a lot. Landon Roberts played a ton last year. Some of that was because Dante Hightower was not available. But I do think that a guy in that role will see a significant number of snaps throughout the course of the regular season. And just based on health, based on what we've seen so far, I think that he's probably the best bet to be there. The Patriots, quote-unquote, rookie of the year.
Yeah.
Maybe you can still look at Sony Michel as having the most potential, because if he gets back and gets healthy, this is a guy that people were comparing to Alvin Kamara a couple months ago. So he definitely could still kind of return to that status. I think it'll take him a little bit longer. But yeah, if I'm looking at a Patriots Rookie of the Year favorite right now, I'm going to go with Bentley.
Yeah, I think he probably would be. And if either Dante Hightower or Kyle Van Noy suffers an injury, then Bentley's role would increase. But yeah, it will be curious to see who that top 3rd linebacker coming out of the field in week 1 is, whether it is Juwan Bentley or whether it is Landon Roberts. But yeah, I don't know. Early in the season, probably won't see a lot of the rookies. Maybe J.C. Jackson gets there in a little bit. Maybe Bentley gets in there a little bit. But this was definitely a draft class that we thought would make an immediate impact, since the Patriots had 2 first-round picks and they had 2 second-round picks too, right? Or was it
they
just
had one? They had, because they did all those trades.
I know, it's so confusing what they originally had.
They had 2 ones, 1, 2, and then they didn't draft until the 5th when they got Bentley.
Right, but originally they had some thirds in there too, right?
Yes, they made about 15 trades on draft night.
So yeah, I mean, people definitely expected a lot of impact players to come in, but it hasn't worked out that way so far for them. So fourth storyline would be replacing the departed players, top players who Patriots lost in free agency and in trades: wide receiver Brandon Cooks, left tackle Nate Solder, cornerback Malcolm Butler, running back Dion Lewis. I think that covers all the bases, right?
You can put Danny Amendola in there.
Oh yeah, and wide receiver Danny Amendola as well. As far as Cooks goes, Philip Dorsett basically fills in for Cooks and Amendola to some degree, and Julian Edelman. Obviously,
no pressure though.
Yeah, obviously Chris Hogan has to take on a bigger role, and Cordero Patterson's going to be that number 3 gadget type player. He'll probably receive maybe even a similar amount of snaps as Danny Amendola, but that's definitely a position where Patriots lost more than they brought in. It basically seems like. As far as that position goes,
I would say that. I mean, we probably would have said differently a month or 2 ago, but based on all the nonsense that's happened with their wide receiver position, then it definitely doesn't look like an upgrade on paper.
At left tackle, Trent Brown is going to be taking over for Nate Solder. We'll basically just kind of have to see how he does. It's not a position he's played a lot of in the NFL. He looked fine during the preseason, looked dominant at times during training camp, but it's a bit of a question mark, and there's no real backup plan at left tackle either at this point, unless the Patriots want to put Ladry and Waddle in there. But I think there could be some tough sledding for Trent Brown, but we might actually see him improve as the season goes along.
Yeah, there's a lot of pressure on him. Like you said, there's no real backup. I mean, the backup is Ladry and Waddle, who played pretty well on the right side last season, but doesn't have a ton of left tackle experience. And it was obvious that the Patriots wouldn't have been comfortable going into this season with Ladry and Waddle as their left tackle, because they went out and got Brown, and then they went out and drafted Isaiah Wynn. The Isaiah Wynn injury could look very costly if Brown struggles at all, but overall, you said earlier that his play has been a little bit overrated this summer, maybe, and I think you're probably right in that regard. But overall, I mean, I've been impressed with what I've seen from him. A guy switching over to play a new position. He's so big, and he moves well for a guy that's 6'8", 380 pounds. I do think there's going to be a little bit of growing pains, both from coming over to the Patriots system and moving positions and all that. But so far, I think fans can have decently high hopes for Trent Brown.
Yeah, Trent Brown moves well for a 6'8", 380 pounder. He doesn't move well. Like compared to Nate Solder. Yep. But given his size and given his length, he doesn't need to move quite as well. Patriots don't need to replace Malcolm Butler as far as the Super Bowl goes, but as far as their starting defense last year, it came down to Eric Rowe and Jason McCourty, and Eric Rowe definitely seems to have won out that cornerback spot.
It seems like he won out that cornerback spot pretty early in the summer, too.
So, I don't know. I have decently high hopes for Eric Rowe, actually, because I think he had a really good summer, but we'll see what happens when the games matter. But he really wasn't allowing many receptions at all during the preseason, which was really good to see out of a player who has been kind of up and down throughout his Patriots career.
Yeah, he's been a little bit inconsistent, but so far this summer, I mean, both through training camp and the preseason, he's been probably the Patriots' most reliable cornerback, even because Stephon Gilmore did struggle a little bit in those preseason games. So, yeah, I mean, if he does kind of, if he slips a little bit, if he's not able to replicate that early in the regular season, maybe you'll see Jason McCourty get some snaps over there. Maybe you see even someone like J.C. Jackson slide in there. But right now, I mean, as I wrote earlier today when I was talking about my 7 quote-unquote under-the-radar Patriots players to watch this year, one of them is Eric Rowe, and based on the way he's played this summer, there's no reason to expect any kind of downslide once the regular season starts.
Definitely, and then Dion Lewis is the final one in there, and there's no one player who's going to replace Dion Lewis. I think it really comes down to Rex Burkhead and Sony Michel. Those guys, once they're both healthy, once they're both ready to go, as far as Sony Michel is concerned, I think that they will get the majority of the Patriots carries. I think we might see more of Jeremy Hill early in the season, but he's kind of more replacing Mike Gillislee from last season. But I think at least to start the season, Rex Burkhead will be the Patriots' bell cow type running back like Dion Lewis was last year for them.
Yeah, that's what it seems like. I mean, everybody, when the Patriots drafted Sony Michel, the hope was, I would assume, that he could become Dion Lewis 2.0. He could be that lead back for the Patriots this season. Like we talked about earlier, there's still a chance that can happen. It is a very long season, but I'm not looking at him in that role early in the year. Probably not until mid-season at least. It's going to be the Rex Burkhead and Jeremy Hill show to start off things for sure.
Definitely, and I think that you could certainly do worse than having Jeremy Hill as that back in your offense, at least in short yardage and to carry the ball a lot over the first few weeks. Fifth storyline here is Brian Flores replacing Matt Patricia. We'll see, how this goes. There's been a lot of talk about the Patriots being a more aggressive defense, but I don't know. I mean, we're basing that off like preseason games and training camp. I think that
basically one preseason game,
and we won't know how Flores' defense will look compared to Patricia's after week 1 either, since they're playing Deshaun Watson. I certainly don't expect the Patriots to pin their ears back and rush Deshaun Watson like they'd rush a Ben Roethlisberger or a less mobile quarterback. So I don't know. I think the Patriots' defense has the potential to be better than they were last season, just because Dante Hightower's back on the field, but it will be interesting to see if Flores does allow the Patriots defense to play a little bit more free, a little less complicated, and maybe with a little bit more pressure.
Absolutely. I think something that I'm kind of expecting from talking to Patriots defenders early in training camp, asking them what the difference is between the Matt Patricia defense and the Brian Flores defense. A lot of them we're talking about it being simpler or a little simplified, and it does seem, just from watching the preseason games, obviously there's no game planning involved in these games, so we could see a completely different scheme once the regular season comes. It does seem it's going to be more of a basic 4-3, or I guess 4-2-5 defense, rather than the one Matt Patricia liked to run last year with the linebackers up on the edge and a lot of movement, a lot of moving parts. It does seem like Brian Flores wants to just kind of dial it down a little bit and simplify it. And we did see it. We saw a very aggressive defense during the preseason, like you said, and I'm interested to see whether that translates into the regular season, because the Patriots pass rush obviously caught a ton of heat last season, really over the last 2 seasons, for not being able to bring down opposing quarterbacks enough. So I'd be interested to see whether they kind of employ a more blitz happy scheme than what they've seen in the past. But yeah, we'll see in week 1. Like you said, it's going to be probably a bit of a unique game plan when you're defending somebody against somebody like Deshaun Watson.
Final storyline is this the last year of the Belichick-Brady dynasty? I think no one would have really been expecting us to talk about this even as early as the beginning of last season, but with all the drama that surrounded everything at the end of last season, with will Brady retire, will Belichick retire, will Belichick go to the Giants, it all just seems
Belichick
like
to the Giants story.
I
forgot about that storyline. That was a weird week.
I don't know. I mean, I think this is. I don't think this is the last year. That's just gut reaction. I don't think it's going to be the last year, but who knows? There was enough talk about it last year that it at least raises the question.
If Patriots win the Super Bowl this year, does Tom Brady retire?
If I were Brady and Belichick, I'd probably just walk away.
I would too.
If they won the Super Bowl. But I don't know. I mean, Brady wants to get to the top of that mountain, and I think he wants to get even higher than the top of that mountain. So,
yeah, according to his Tom vs. Time epilogue that dropped a couple hours ago, he says he still wants to play another 5 more seasons, even though it's going to be, I think he said, effing very, very hard or something like that. Brady was dropping a lot of curse words in that. That was pretty entertaining. But
this is apropos of nothing, but or not of nothing, but before the Giants preseason game, the 4th and final preseason game, Tom Brady, Odell Beckham, and Julian Edelman were all talking on the field at the same time. I think that some Patriots fan replied to the picture of like, oh, I want to see all 3 of those guys on the same team. I kind of want to be like, if they were on the same team, it would probably be the Giants. Like, there's much higher probability it would be in New York than it would be in New England, just based on all 3 of those players' contract statuses. Odell Beckham just signed an extension with the Giants, whereas Brady and Edelman are both up after next season. So if those 3 players ever played on the same team, I don't think it would be here. So I don't think Patriots fans really want that to happen.
Doug Kyde conspiracy hour. I love it.
Yeah. One final thing. So last year, Jordan Richards started week 1 of the regular season.
He played 42 snaps. 42.
What is your boldest prediction about week 1? I have mine. It's on the same realm as a Jordan Richards type. My boldest prediction is that Geno Grissom starts across the defensive line from Trey Flowers rather than Adrian Claiborne or Dietrich Wise.
That's pretty bold.
I don't think it's going to happen, but I also never would have predicted Jordan Richards starting at linebacker in Week 1 last year. Do you have a bold prediction for Week 1?
Bold prediction?
I'm putting you on the spot.
Jacob Hollister, 6 catches, 80 yards, 1 touchdown.
I like it.
Which means he's probably not going to play.
Yours is a lot more positive than mine, I'll say that. All right, well, that will do it for this week's NESN Patriots podcast. We will be back next week. From now on, we will be recording these on Wednesdays. I think that means they'll be dropping on Wednesdays.
Ideally.
We'll see. Ideally, that's the case. But we will talk to you guys again next week. Keep it on NESN.com for all of your Patriots coverage. Follow me on Twitter at Doug Kide. Follow Zach on Twitter at ZachCoxNESN. And that will do it. Thank you for listening.